Right, I think we're live now. Okay, so good evening, everyone. This is episode 7, I believe, of the Blob Watch. And I've titled this and I think I'll try and get this pronunciation right. I called it the Tino, was it Tino Hickey Banzai edition, which is a sort of reference to the recent trade deal that has been brought forward and in the initial stages between the United Kingdom and Japan. This is quite heavy sort of economics talk for this channel. So I've decided to invite two experts in that field. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Economic Rude or Jack.
Hello.
And from the and the Mad Mercenary, who it features on Radical Liberation's channel on the various Econ discussions as well.
Hello there. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, thank you both for being on. So I guess as we sort of discussed about before we went live, obviously the purpose of this stream will be talking about the trade deal that has in principle been agreed between the UK and Japan, and this and it's of course we got the backdrop of the current loggerhead situation with the United Kingdom and the EU over internal internal market access. But for the moment, if we go on with Japan, so Jack, what was your initial thoughts to this announcement of a trade deal?
Well, I'm not particularly surprised because, of course, the UK is going to be looking for post-Brexit trade deals, which is, of course, what's happening. When it comes to trade deals, it's always a kind of mixed bag because, from our perspective, the free market being left alone is a good thing, and so, of course, free trade, generally speaking, would be considered a good thing. And so one might think, well, everyone's going to agree on this, but of course, anyone who delves deep will actually know that a lot of people who are free marketeers are against trade deals. So if you take, for instance, the European Union, this single market is essentially a trade deal, but the problem with it is that it means that there are tariffs on all of the other goods, not to mention the regulations that come with it. And so at first, when I saw this trade deal with Japan, I thought, well, it's good because free trade is a good thing. But there are one or two onions in there if you look into the details. So, for instance, I read somewhere that the UK and Japan are trying to get some more regulation in on IP laws as part of the deal. And a lot of people on our side are very split on IP laws, but regulation in general I consider to be a bad thing. And so it's to me, it's a very mixed bag, and we're going to have to see how it plays out because the talks are still going on, I think.
Okay. Yes, because that would come under digital and data, which I've got a few notes set out here.
Yeah.
And I think IP laws that does come up as well, along with privacy. Mad Mercenary, obviously, as being sort of the Australian on the stream here, and someone who be in the know of this. The United Kingdom has accepted as one of the trade envoys former Prime Minister Tony Abbott. And obviously, there's been a few controversy, which we've discussed in previous stream. But I mean, what is your experience of Tony Abbott when it comes to trade deals and international relations in that regards?
Tony Abbott in our nation came from the Liberal Party, and the Liberal Party is is in a coalition at the moment in Australia with the Nationals, and this makes up the major conservative bloc within Australia. So, what we have to understand with Tony Abbott is that he is a very conservative person. His views are he is a very polite person, but his views are incredibly conservative, and I mean that in the sense of a Peter Hitchens conservative. He is not as Jack or I would see it as being conservative in fundamental values yet free on economic matters. He's certainly better than Peter Hitchens on that regard, but his experience is very much getting the best deal for that nation. That does not necessarily mean free trade.
So a bit like Trump, you could say.
A little bit, but I would say he's much better on free trade aspects and the actual sense of free trade. But his goal would definitely be to get the best deal for the United Kingdom, not necessarily that it's free trade. But you can expect very much free trade aspects to be in there. When he was in office, he was in my opinion, a solid politician, but unpopular while in office, which was one of the reasons that he was removed from office by his own party. But that's another matter entirely. But I think with Tony Abbott, what he brings to the table is, as Australians, we are very dependent upon our exports, especially within raw materials and agriculture. So within those realms and those elements, and especially standing up to places like Japan and China and understanding how to negotiate with these far eastern powers that Australia usually has to do, he has a wealth of experience in there. So I'm not in any doubt that you guys are in good hands on that front.
Yes, and of course, we know that again, Tony Abbott, which I'll stress again, he's an envoy, which is and he's an unpaid position. So he's not exactly. I know the media in the UK and Europe and several media outlets in Australia have been suggesting that he's this ambassadorial position. That he's not. He's an envoy, unpaid. When it comes to the trade team, he's not the head honcho. He's just effectively an advisor for the UK government. But yes, he's managed to. From what the reporting of this is that he was involved with the initial talks with Japan, which has been, I think, in this country quite a surprise in several areas. And I think the two areas which were a surprise for the media in this country, especially those in the financial sectors and the financial reporters, was the financial services and goods and I think food produce. So if I just so we've got the first one here, which is digital and data, and that's obviously this is very because this is from the Department for International Trade, which has set out a list of agreed positions that both Japanese and UK government have agreed on. So in the first one, it's the making it easier for UK tech companies to export and grow, and it includes the commitment to net neutrality and data privacy. But Jack, you have one concern about this area, I believe.
Yeah, I have, several concerns. This part of the trade agreement seems to be part of one of the worst parts of the package, in that this isn't free trade, right? We've got a trade agreement, but it comes with a lot of regulations and a lot of protection. It's all the usual stuff about personal data localization, or bans on that, IP laws, etc. And I mean, it's not necessarily adding much because we've got this stuff with the EU. But the fact that they're signing a deal and keeping this stuff in is, in my opinion, bad. I think for fairly obvious reasons.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, I was watching a breakdown video of the digital and data, which was by another YouTuber. And of course, he was a bit more enthusiastic about this, in the sense that he believed that this would be completely breaking down, regulations, the aspect that British companies could open up servers in Japan, and all that, so that would be a so he was very enthusiastic about that, and I think the government equally has been quite enthusiastic about the digital data, because I mean that's been put on number one on their target, on their set list, which is quite interesting, because obviously most of our digital data currently, as we've said, it's been via the EU,
right,
and that's been one of the I guess you say the political footballs that we've experienced during the whole Brexit debacle, where the Remainers were saying that the fact that if we would leave without a trade deal with the European Union, we wouldn't have the digital or the data capacity to continue running vital services, and all the other sort of nonsense that was spouted during that time.
Yep.
And so
it's as to the introduction of it by the government, it's an interesting one, because I mean obviously governments always have incentives to introduce regulations. This is one of those issues that, despite what I said earlier about it being quite divided, it does have an interesting divide in the mainstream, in that most economists agree that free trade is a good thing, and so push towards these free trade deals. It's the politicians that are the barrier. There's a guy called Bjorn Lomborg, who I'm sure many people know. He has the Copenhagen Consensus think tank. He's very big on being against climate change initiatives for economic reasons. But he famously got a bunch of economists and other people together in his think tank, the Copenhagen Consensus, to essentially come up with a priority list for what governments should focus their revenues on the world stage. And all the people who got there came together and agreed that the most important thing for everyone in the world as a collective to focus on should be ensuring free trade. So clearly this is something that people want to push for. And in addition to this, Liz Truss, who's our trade secretary and is the one who is doing this, she's probably one of the biggest advocates for free trade in the entirety of the Conservative Party. This is basically what she's famous for. And so you'd think, this is good, but I think you can see Boris's influence perhaps with these regulations coming in with the data. And as I say, his incentive is that, of course, the government want to control this stuff. It's political. Most people consider it to, a lot of people consider this stuff to be good. A lot of people are in favor of this sort of intervention. And so as a result, he thinks he can win votes through it. And of course, Boris Johnson isn't an advocate of free trade. So
no, because of course he has spoken in favor of he frames it as the protection, protecting, which is, I guess, the sort of European Union's sort of stance of protecting the integrity of the single market, is the sort of hymn sheet of the protectionist within the EU. And so I guess my question to both of you in that regard is, from the Japanese perspective, what is the incentive for digital and data protection, digital and data in this trade agreement?
Merc, do you want to answer, or shall I?
No, go right ahead.
Well, I'd say that probably there's a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of big companies involved with this, and they most likely lobby. So there's probably lobbying involved, a lot of money being pointed around, and also the reasons I mentioned a minute ago. It's political on both sides of the field, because there are a lot of voters who feel like this data protection is very important. There's a lot of people who are very skeptical about the information that these big social media conglomerates and such have. We've seen it in the US recently, for instance, and so as a result, there's votes in there. So both of those reasons, I'd say, are on Japan's side of the incentives.
Yes. And I just realised they have got a possible general election coming up. Maybe not this year, but at least next year, first quarter of next year. So again, that might play into it. So yeah, I would say political. Is there anything further that any of you two would like to add? I guess with the digital and data section of the trade deal.
I don't think there's anything I've got to add. It's just bad that they're instilling these regulations. Is my take on it.
I mean, I'm a bit more generous than Jack in this sense towards people who want to protect the digital data, because obviously this is a sphere that is becoming hugely important to just the everyday lives of people, and I would like to see security around that, but unfortunately with these sorts of things, because of public choice economics, we can clearly see that political incentives usually outweigh security or basic economics. So it's I see what he's talking about there.
And also, it's worth noting that part of the problem, and this is part of the incentive for particularly many Americans who, of course, have been on this subject a lot recently. Part of the problem is the power of these big corporations, particularly the social media corporations and such. And the reason why these are so powerful is because essentially they're in with the government. They lobby. In return, they get these regulations which help them maintain their size of the market. And if it was a competitive market, I highly doubt that data would be as much of an issue, mainly because you'd likely get a big incentive there for private data security companies to pop up everywhere, which we probably do have. But it is what it is.
There are those sorts of companies. The problem is just that the state is so heavily involved in these sorts of things due to national security concerns. It really does become just a national security issue, which is then mixed in with politics, mixed in with everything else that we just talked about. So in an ideal world, we would really like to see it privatized, of course, but we have to live in reality, and reality is that these aspects are handled by the state. And in my opinion, sometimes they should be handled by the state, but I guess that's another conversation about the role and proper function of government.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jaws, the Great and Powerful, is spouting off nonsense in the chat. Welcome. And I'll just say welcome to Years, and Radical Liberation is also here, and Saffron, and a few usual suspects. So welcome to the stream. I guess we'll go on to the second stage of the deal, which was financial services. And the Bad Mercenary has just sent to me on the private chat a very helpful link to the UK government website, which is sort of listed it in chronological order that appears on the Twitter page that we have before you. And so the second point is financial services, ensuring UK firms can secure licenses to operate in Japan. So I guess to both you gentlemen, thoughts?
This one's a bit better than the previous section. Essentially, what they're trying to do here is make it easier to get hold of licenses to operate. I have no problem with this. The only problem is that, and the problem with this is it's unspecified, so we can't go into too much detail, but one of the potential problems is that financial regulators in both the UK and Japan are going to be looking at ways to work together. It says on the website that you mentioned that they're looking for ways to reduce regulatory friction. So this would imply perhaps some sort of way to reduce regulations, but I'm very skeptical about that. It seems like they're trying to replace the regulations we currently have in place with the EU, so as opposed to reduce it.
My experience with this sort of stuff is that when people say we're trying to reduce regulation friction or we're trying to make it more streamlined, it is not that they're reducing the regulations, but rather having the same regulations on both the books of both Japan and the United Kingdom.
Yep.
So it's not removing the regulations; it's just making them the same.
Yeah, it's an overhaul
obviously,
of EU then.
Right, and on this idea of making it more streamlined, I think probably mine and Jack's fundamental disagreement with this is that it assumes the necessary need for licensing.
Right, exactly.
Which is, in our opinion, I think I can speak for both of us here, but I think in our opinion it is not needed because when you have a genuine free market, it usually regulates itself.
Yep.
Yeah. And
yeah, it is one of those where it's good that they're making or claiming that they're going to make a step in the right direction, in that they're going to make it easier to get licensing, but it is still bad that licenses are required, basically.
The question, sorry, not the question, but the statement assumes certain aspects, and it's those assumptions that we are in disagreement with.
Yep.
I think also that it is also, I mean, this trade deal is wrapped up in, because Japan is pretty much drawing from the current arrangement that exists with the European Union deal with Japan. And so I think this is, I mean, I think Japan has definitely used a template for that deal and gone to Britain and pretty much said, what can you offer us which is better? I think the financial service one for me was interesting because it was the one area that many didn't think that Japan would be so amenable towards Britain, and I think one of the reasons was that the European Union itself, in the withdrawal agreement, wished to keep the status quo with the financial sector in Britain. In a future trade deal with the UK. So, I mean, for me, that was quite interesting because I didn't expect any when it came to financial services that we would get much information from this deal.
Yeah,
Right.
Financial services are one of the UK's biggest exports. And so this is why it's so important for the UK. Is obviously we don't export much, but one of our big exports is finance. And so I guess a lot of people in Japan will be concerned because they're letting one of the, a huge market into their backyard. And of course, there's a lot of people who are in favor of protecting domestic businesses and domestic financial services. So that's probably where a lot of it comes from.
I mean, I think this comes from the fact that both Japan and the United Kingdom, to a certain extent, are in weak positions due to circumstance. So Japan has not really recovered from its crash in the 80s and 90s, and the United Kingdom, due to its current circumstance of leaving leaving the EU, is in a weaker position when it comes to the fact that it hasn't been able to do trade deals for a while. And it doesn't know really, no offense, it doesn't know how it's operating at the moment. The waters are a bit murky.
But
So,
you're right, because it's as we said, 50 years. Britain. This is the first time Britain has done this in 50 years. I mean, I would compare it to effectively when the United States got their independence, and the first sort of emerging trade deals that the early, a new nation would have to, because effectively this is what it is. It's a new generation of those in government, a new generation
right.
developing trade deals.
Right, and this is what I was talking about, in the sense that both are in a weak position and both need to be at the table here. I think Japan understands that it's in a very weak economic position and needs trade deals, free trade deals, quote unquote, to boost its economy and try and put it back on the right path. It also needs the United Kingdom on side in any potential tension in the South China Sea or anything like that. So shoring up those sorts of things. And if it means sacrificing some domestic dynamism, I think they're willing to trade that off. But the United Kingdom, on the other hand, is coming to this as very much a newer partner, although I don't think it's outside the repertoire of the United Kingdom to negotiate said trade deal. But it's just both sides need to be at the table here, which is why I think you saw both sides being more cooperative. When neither side has much negotiating power, you become very cooperative.
Yeah, well, it is quite interesting that they've managed to agree with so much, because obviously there are some serious logistical problems with this trade deal, in producing the trade deal, because it was done over video call or something, I believe, rather than in person, because of everything that's going on, of course.
Yes.
And you'd say usually if people are doing they're trying to hash out a trade agreement over a video call as opposed to in person, you'd imagine that it would be much more difficult to come to agreements. So it is interesting that they seem to have agreed on so much.
There's also the language barrier there, but that's easily rectified.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know. I guess the people who, cause we know that Tony Abbott obviously was involved with the initial talks with Japan. It'd be interesting to know that the sort of I guess, I mean, it would be civil servants, it would be trade advisors, and maybe even a think tank helping. It'd be interesting to know how they went about it. But I mean, of course, as you said, both stand to gain, and both and obviously Japan. The concern, I guess, for them would be with the financial services is that Britain is a very large exporter. I mean, I think it was we export. I mean, our financial services, according to UK government website, financial services are our biggest export to Japan, which is making up 28% of all UK exports. And so that would be interesting to see how that plays out long term for Japan, because you're going to see the financial services within Japan changing. I think if this deal does go through, and again, the important thing is to note that this is agreed in principle. So none of this is yet to go through the Japanese Parliament, and more than likely there will be politicians in that Parliament who will raise concerns and it may be wishing to amend certain aspects of this agreement. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting on the financial services.
I think this comes down to the fact that, as you mentioned before, that Japan's going to be entering into an election year very soon, and getting a feather in the cap of Shinzo Abe. I think it's Shinzo Abe that's the prime minister at the moment. I could be wrong, but getting a cap in the government's repertoire or resume will be good in the eyes of the people, because obviously trying to boost the country up from the stagnation it's been in is probably a big selling point. Apart from this, obviously going through both the United Kingdom and Japanese governments, it's going to be subject to public choice economics and comes with all the incentives of individuals within the government. So we'll have to wait and see how it turns out. But I'm not holding my breath, because obviously a lot of these things can change. Also, I think I don't want to say a bad way of thinking, but I think it's not exactly productive to always think of these in terms of we will always have X industry. So, for example, financial services is incredibly dynamic and can move to different places around the world, just the services themselves and where people invest their money quite quickly. So I would just be wary about relying so much on financial services if you guys are in the UK.
I think that, I mean, that's one thing that I've got I guess an agreement with, is that I think that we run the risk of putting all our eggs in one basket with financial services, and I think given the current situation in the world when it comes to the fallout from COVID and government policies towards COVID, I think financial services should be should just be a part of a wider package. And of course, we got further on down the line, we've got manufacturing, British goods and such.
We export a lot of weapons. That's one of our bigger exports.
Yeah.
But part of the reason why the UK has such a big financial sector, particularly on a global level, is because of the geographic location. It's smack bang in the middle on most maps of Asia and the US, and as a result, the time zones help with trading.
We're one of the largest empires in history and used to be one of the world's reserve currency. So,
and also the language aspect.
Yes.
But to go back to the election aspect, you can see a lot of the importance in that in the framing of this deal. A lot of the wording that they're using is, look at this free trade deal we've got, free trade. And when people think free trade, they think, money's being moved around, economic growth. But at the same time, they're clearly, as you can see on the screen here, they're clearly showing, we've got this regulation, and this gives people the security that many voters might be seeking when it comes to for instance, their data and so on, which, as I say, as we've seen in the US, a lot of people are particularly concerned about. So they're trying to play it both up.
I wonder if it's the knee-jerk reaction people have to the word free. Because I've often wondered whether that's the reason people keep using the word free trade deal instead of maybe bilateral agreement, which sounds a bit more bureaucratic and boring. The word free kind of has this visceral reaction.
I think it's more like I think politically, I think free. I think bilateral there means, I think there's an automatic assumption of there's some hooks attached, it's the old saying that nothing in life comes free and all that sort of stuff. I think it's more just political jargon that is terminology, the term's terminology, really.
Free as a word obviously has positive connotations.
Yes.
Right.
So it's why it's so much more important for those of us who are in favor of free markets to say to use the term free markets as opposed to say that we're just capitalists or whatever, because capitalism, whilst not directly the same as free markets,
capitalism is a I think it's a Marxist invention anyway. So.
Right. So this is what I was going to say. It's a left-wing term in origin, and it's mainly used. Right, exactly. It's got a lot of negative connotations because of the way that anti-capitalist agendas have been framed, and so it's why I'd say it's better for us to use terms like free markets, that sort of stuff.
Just on the, I guess on the. Go on the free this and free that. P-Man just raised something which again, this will sort of be a bit of a side note, but Boris Johnson, before the last election, he talked about in his manifesto the concept of free ports / enterprise zones. Now, where I live, we have an enterprise zone in Bristol. And he was planning to extend that to free ports dotted around the country. I think the idea was to rejuvenate deprived coastal communities. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on those two ideas of effectively free ports and enterprise zones, which are basically zero business rates, no tax, that sort of stuff? Very similar to what Margaret Thatcher did with Canary Wharf back in the 80s.
Yeah, well, the free ports, in my mind, is kind of. I understand why people do it, but it's kind of a almost removing of the veil, right? Politicians do understand that these free economic zones, these areas with there's no tax, no tariffs, these things are very attractive and they drive business. but it's because of how do I put this? Because of political pressures, because people want money for this, money for that. People levy taxes, levy tariffs to pay for all these sorts of things, which then makes your nation less attractive. By having free port zones, I get what they do. You can bring the goods into the nation while officially in the books, still having these sorts of tariffs and saying, yes, we got these tariffs on these goods and we're going to pay for it. While in reality, you have these free trade areas that allow the goods to come in and still be attractive to exporters and importers. But the free trade ports themselves are an admission that they know that these sorts of policies, that tariffs and local content requirements and bureaucratic messes don't work. So it constantly amazes me that how you can hold one thought in one part of your mind and another thought in another part of your mind, and try not to rectify that. I mean, we all have that to a certain degree, including myself, but it's just it boggles my mind half the time as to how people can just so openly do that. I get why that's done. It's political pressures. It's public choice, but it's just very infuriating in my mind.
And my take on it is, I mean, obviously it's good to have no regulation, no tax, no trade, or should I say reduced. But a lot of the problem is that it views economics the way that government views economics, and it's all about growth. It's all about making more money, which we can then spend on more stuff. But of course, the point in an economy isn't this. The point in an economy is to ensure that goods and services are most efficiently distributed. And so when essentially this is a macro version of if subsidies were to be given to a particular company. Essentially, these areas are being favored, and as a result, goods and services are more likely to go there and not elsewhere. It creates an imbalance of sorts, essentially. And so it's, the individual reduction of taxes and such is good, but it may end up actually just hurting other areas.
I mean, I'm in favor of the free ports and just having lower tariffs and all that sort of stuff. But I want the free port to be the entire nation, not just these specific areas. It's incredibly frustrating to see that these political pressures, you have to have these tariffs, even though it's bad on just about every level. But now you have to add another area of complication to get around the tariffs because it's politically popular. It's like people want both things. They want the tariffs, and yet they also want to be known for free trade. They want the protection, but they also want to be known for liberty. You can't have both, and the voters are fickle. It's
it's a trade-off between the two.
Yes.
That's I mean, I think because I'm running for a local election in the Conservative Party, and I've been exploring for where I'm standing the concept of an enterprise zone, which is a bit different than a free port because tariffs. We don't have like the whole tariffs and obviously the port idea concept. It's more about like zero business rates and that sort of stuff. So I've been exploring that and looking at the sort of examples, other local examples of where that's been implemented and what the outcome from that has been. I guess one of the concerns I've heard from a lot of local people has been how does one, and this is what you've gone into, how do one protect the living standards of the people who live in the area, while at the same time ensuring that there is business can flourish.
Yeah, it's why I think it's best to think of this stuff similar to providing subsidies to businesses. At first thought, if you're not an economist, one might think, of course, giving subsidies to a business is good because then the business will do better. If they do better, they can hire more people, they can invest it, produce a better product or whatever. But of course, the reality is that it just gives an unfair advantage to that company in the market, and the same thing applies here.
And that's
they don't even become. They don't even become better. They just become bloated husks of bureaucratic mess half the time when they get over generous subsidies.
Right.
And that's what happens. I think you two just summed up the premise of the European Union, or the EEC in its conception was effectively, that for it was agriculture, steel manufacturing, and it was effectively the concept that no competitiveness between nations. It would just be all under one umbrella, protectionist, and receiving, and then certain nations would receive subsidies, like
and it's worth noting, to quickly interject with something that's slightly different, but this is precisely why there's no third way option in an economy. You either have free trade or you have forced distribution, because giving subsidies and things, a lot of people, particularly on the right, air quotes, they claim to be in favor of the third way methods of running an economy that you saw a lot in Europe in the 1930s. They seem to think that you can simply favor certain corporations, and that's a much better way of running an economy than either complete central planning or free trade, this middle of the road economy sort of thing. But the reality is, as we've just broken down with this example of subsidies, this is just central planning. It has the same effects, just perhaps on a smaller level.
I can't disagree with that. It's just people seem to think that third way. I believe Tony Blair used that terminology when running his campaign, right? This third way alternative. It just boils down to what form this central control takes. So, yes, the third way may not be direct state control, but indirect state control or direct state control still involves state control. It doesn't matter whether it's through subsidies and business working together in close cooperation with government, or the government simply nationalizing the industry, or the government in charge having party members on the boards of certain key industrial companies. It's still state control. It's still a variation of either state control, or you can go for an alternative, which is actual free trade.
Yeah, it all boils down to the dichotomy between the only two ways that goods and services can be distributed. They can either be distributed through force, or they can be distributed through voluntary exchange. There's no other way. These are the only ways they can be moved. And this state intervention is a method of force. It's got the disguise of being in the form of the carrot rather than the stick.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the third way. If you look at a lot of, not to go off too much on sidetrack here, but when it comes to Blair's policy, it is effectively, a lot of it is a mirage of what he says and what it really is. And effectively, a lot of Blair's policies are reworded left-wing policies, but to appeal to those on the centre, and especially those on to the right, which would go on to vote for him.
It was a very civil service sort of way of going about the job, wasn't it? You say one thing and mean another. Again, if anyone's seen Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister, while it is a comedy, and it is a very funny comedy, there is an element of truth in it that says, well, when the civil service says one thing, they mean another, and they will manipulate the statistics to prove what they want in so many words.
Yeah, and I think this. At the moment, this has been sort of played out currently in the civil service. That's why you've seen some friction in the UK with the current ministers in certain departments and civil servants, because they've been briefing against the government to the media, and they've been, as you said, putting out their interpretation of statistics that they've brought out. And I think when it came to the trade deal and such, a lot of the civil servants initially, before Boris's election, were pretty much going along the lines of, well, any trade deal which is not with the EU it will be a massive shortfall in the British economy. And so that was the line that the established civil servants went down. A lot of people wondered why. I mean, I couldn't really, looking back at it, I can't really claim why there was this sort of united position on this. The only thing I could really look at is that a lot of civil servants have a European pension, part of the European pension, so maybe there was own personal incentive to behave, to behave in the way that many of them did.
Well, I think it's ultimately the reason I brought up the civil service and Blair is because I think that's ultimately where the British civil service changed in their sort of baseline. Blair put it in such a way that appealed to the civil service and the centre, and it kind of, I don't want to say infected, but changed the outlook of the civil service. So, for example, when the civil service got on side of Blair, and after Blair left office, well, it doesn't mean that Blairist ideas within the civil service died. They were incorporated. And I think this, and as we pointed out, I think Blair was most definitely just a left-winger who could put it in a centrist or bureaucratic form. He has infected the ideas of the civil service, and instead of them being pro-Britain establishment, semi-traditional values with some bureaucratic sleight of hand, now they're more left-wing, appealing to centrism, adopting all of these sort of more radical left-wing tendencies, but in a bureaucratic format, like Tony Blair did.
Yeah, it's all about finding a new way to sell the same old ideas.
Yes.
You know, it's like when Keynesianism came along, it was treated, it still is treated as though it was some new form of economics, but it wasn't. It was simply trying to reverse every bit of progress that we've made since the classical era of economics. It's, you know, and then of course, you know, you have people like Blair coming along, and all this stuff with subsidies and these policies that seem less direct. One might call them perhaps slyly positive economic intervention, in that it's stuff that supposedly helps companies as opposed to taxing companies or regulating companies. And this is purely just a political game. And also this is part of the reason to be skeptical of behavioral economics, which is one of the more recent schools. Their whole idea is that they want to influence the economy, but they want to go about it without directly intervening. Their idea is that they can use this thing called nudging, where they attempt to provide intervention by putting incentives in place for companies to act or whatever in a certain way, as opposed to directly forcing them to do so. And of course, this is them just trying to masquerade the fact that they are still interventionists. So don't be fooled by that if you see behavioral economists anywhere.
Right. Yeah. So effectively, that I mean, it is basically all. I mean, as we said, it's all sexed up versions of the same old record.
It's all the same stuff that's been peddled for literally centuries.
I guess, okay, so I mean, I think we've probably moved on from the financial services bit. So, I mean, we'll get onto British goods. So, again, quite similar to probably what we've discussed as well. Tariff-free access for more UK goods. And they've got the example from knitwear to biscuits. We'll probably include 3 and 4 in this because it both has the same aspects to it. Both British goods, iconic foods as well. I don't know why I didn't include it in both, but just another thing for them to do to make it look good. From according to the government report on this, they have claimed that this would effectively be 99%. Hang on a sec. 99% access without without tariffs. That is what is being claimed. That this and example in this is obviously British goods and iconic British foods, which includes beef, pork, cheese, and salmon. So again, I think we mentioned this before. When it comes to goods, it's the initial bit is that they're putting in these stages is obviously reducing restrictions is the sort of common theme that we've got going. So I guess again, both your guys take on this.
Well, the tariff side of things, obviously, it's good to have tariff-free access. Having tariffs simply creates artificial scarcity. It regulates what goods can be sold, and as a result, fewer companies operate that otherwise would be there. Hence, the artificial scarcity. And so, obviously, that's good. The problem is, I'm currently looking at the government website that's in the private chat. That has more detail on this stuff. The section after it goes into more detail, and unfortunately, it seems as though a lot of protection on UK goods are going to be introduced.
Yeah.
So that's of course a problem.
I'll just bring it.
What kind of protections, by the way?
It says, I'll read out the passage. It says, new protection for more iconic UK goods, increasing geographical indications, or GIs, from just 7 under the terms of the EU-Japan deal to potentially over 70 under our new agreement, covering goods including English sparkling wine, Yorkshire Wensleydale, and Welsh lamb. And then it goes on about improved recognition, blah, blah, blah.
So what is this, just labeling on the packaging that's made in the UK?
I guess. I don't know. I guess indications, perhaps. That's a fairly minor regulation.
Yeah, I think it's like. I mean, I think a lot of it when it comes to the iconic food bit, I think it's like. I mean, I think the cheese one example. It's basically like brand acknowledgement of brands, that sort of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think it's. Again, I think it's more political decision for certain aspects of this, because obviously promoting image of Britain abroad and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, if we assume that it is just saying, this good come from the UK and has a, British flag on it or something, it's a relatively minor regulation. So this is not something to get too worried about. Although I am still opposed to it because, of course, you're forcing companies to put this stuff on their packaging that they might not have wanted to put on for whatever reason. Maybe something to do with marketing. I don't know. Trying to seem more authentically domestic in Japan. Whatever it may be. Oh, I guess it's British goods. It's too minor to worry about, really.
As a principle, I would be against it, but politically, this is actually a very smart move for this government to do in the long term, at least, because it increases the at least brand recognition of British products, as long as these British products are of quality, because you don't want to get a reputation like the Chinese do. Look, yes, is it better that the regulation isn't there? Sure. Is this a minor regulation? Yes. Are there more stuff to consider and worry about rather than this tiny regulation? Absolutely. So,
Fez has just put a very interesting comment in the live chat.
What's he done?
He says it can also involve regulations over how stuff is made, standardization of recipe, etc., to qualify for the status. So, of course, this is worse than just the packaging.
Right.
Yeah.
again, that comes down to the quality aspect, doesn't it?
Yeah. Also, again, they say in the government website, this is the main focus that they bring in on the paragraph before. What was it? Tariff-free access from all UK goods, new and more liberal rules of origin. And I think that's the one that sticks out. It's liberal rules of origin. So again, that sort of reinforces the what we said before, that they are making sure that there is knowledge of where the product is coming from. So they've managed to slip that in there, and quite boldly put that, highlighted that point. But yeah, as she said, that the government's ultimate aspects of making it easier and cheaper for them to sell to Japanese markets.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on whether or not the stuff that Fez says applies to this. Because if it does, then of course it's a much more serious issue than just forcing them to write on the packaging where it's from or whatever. It's obviously regulation is bad. It makes it more expensive for people to produce, which sends out artificial price signals. It reduces competition in the market.
Not only that, it decreases innovation because certain types of regulation. There's an argument to say that certain regulation increases innovation, but
right.
This sort of regulation, where standardization of quality or how certain things can get made, there's a limitation on innovation there, because if someone wants to introduce a new way of making something, or a better widget factory, or a better widget making process, they can't, because it's not up to a certain way of doing something that has been regulated. So if this is what it's meant by that section, then this is a absolutely horrible regulation that's limiting innovation and stifles competition.
Yeah, and sends out artificial price signals.
So that would be something we need to watch out for when the government releases more information on that.
They're probably purposely being very vague about it in this website.
Yeah. Again, as we said, this is it's only an agreement, and so it's yet to pass through the Japanese Parliament and the UK Parliament. So I would say there's a good chance that information on here could change in the coming months. I think it's pretty much certain in some areas that there will be some amendments made. I guess probably going to the Fez, though, and I'll probably ask the Mad Mercenary this. When it comes to Australia's, if we look at Australia's trade agreements with, let's say Japan as well, what is there any comparison that we can look at here in relation to products that or items that are produced in Australia that are exported?
How do I put this? I don't believe that I am qualified to talk on such a topic with any authority, and I wouldn't want to do so in case of making a mistake. I know that's a very cucked answer, but to be quite frank, there's a lot to individual trade deals with nations, and to I could draw general comparisons in the fact that there are these similar sorts of tariffs and regulations, and making the regulation the same in each country rather than removing the regulation itself. But those are very broad examples. But if we were to get into specifics, I'd want to read up about the trade deal I was talking about. I don't want to make some flippant remark.
No. Oh, I mean, okay. To reword it. Do you think Tony Abbott, as a envoy and an advisor on this, and probably someone who, um, uh, from what the government has been saying, is quite a key advisor, do you think that he would find that acceptable? Uh, from because obviously, as we said, he is there to make sure that the British position, he's there for the British position. Do you think that this would be something that he would, given your experience that as your prime minister and somebody who's been in Australian politics, do you think he would accept this, knowing what the potential, as what Fez pointed out?
I think he would see it as a good first step, but not the final step in the line. So this is a good opening salvo in getting trade relations off to a good start. But let's say after this trade deal, we come back in, depending on the situation, maybe 2 to 3 years, and we say, hey, we would like to adjust this to make it more free trade, or we would like to adjust this, and there would be back and forth there. But this is a good first step, I think, would be the position.
Mm.
This, I think, in the mind of how I think this would be viewed, I think this is viewed as to borrow a phrase, a living document that can be constantly updated and changed. This is not
Yes.
set in stone.
No. And again, I've been looking through the document. I think one thing that I've noticed that again, Japan hasn't really pointed out that there's any particular sector that for them that they're what they wish to protect in any way, or that they've gone quite tough in negotiations with, or that we know of. I mean, because obviously this has all been controlled by the British government that they've put out there. So there may be some areas that maybe Japan has said, well, no, we're not going to back down on this. But yeah, the sort of initial of this is that they do seem to be flexible. So I think you're right, man, Mercenary. This does seem like in many ways like a template for further trade amendments to a trade deal. So yeah, I think you're right in this, that it will be subject to change in the future.
Right, and this is the natural life cycle of any trade agreement, in my experience. So when you have these trade agreements, they start as an initial template, then they're reworked over a series of years, and then after a set number of years, they become very bloated and bureaucratic, and a new government, several years down the line, maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, comes in and says, well, this old trade agreement isn't working, we must rewrite a new one, and the whole process starts again. It's a very smart political game, but doesn't change the fact that it is a political game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of people. A lot of people are sort of memeing and making jokes in chat about anime and like P-Man saying prohibition of anime and importation of anime. We are going to get on to the entertainment industry, which we will see if anything is actually relevant to the topic at hand. Ironic as it sounds. So if I just bring us back to the
I would think the demand for anime is quite inelastic, so we could put very high tariffs on that.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we could put so much tariffs on all, not just anime but also hentai as well. All the sort of freaky stuff.
I thought that was the same thing.
Is it the same thing? Yeah,
pretty sure.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
We'll ask P-Man to confirm in the live chat because it seems like he's an expert.
Yeah.
Why is it always back to their strange media with the Japs? Just what is wrong with that nation?
Well,
not enough.
It's what happens when you get nukes twice.
Yeah. The third nuke in that case would not have been immoral. Yeah. So anyway, we're kind of British creative industries. Okay, so we've gone on to the anime and the hentai porn and all that. So yeah, British government has put on tackling online film and music piracy, trademark theft, and copyright breaches. Okay, so it looks like P-Man will not be able to get his pirate anime hentai porn as easily as he would have thought.
I mean,
So,
good luck trying to censor that sort of stuff.
yeah, I mean, it's very ambitious of the British government to set that out there because, I mean, let's just see let's bring up what they said about creative industries. So, on the previous page that we're on, it just says British businesses can now be confident that their brands and innovation will be protected. We have gone beyond the EU on provisions that tackle online infringement of IP rights, such as film and music piracy. I mean, from my perspective, it doesn't really sound like much, to be honest. I mean, just what we had with the EU, copy paste to Japan. It doesn't really change anything from my point of view. So I don't know about you guys.
Well, Mad Merc brought up an interesting aspect of this a minute ago when he was talking about innovation. And when it comes to IP laws and such, a lot of people who defend them argue that part of the benefits of having copyright laws and IP laws and so on is that it actually creates more innovation because there's an incentive there for people to produce, whereas if they're not there, then they produce something and instantly it's just copied. This copyright and IP laws and all this sort of stuff is one of those areas where everyone on the free market side is very divided on it. You get some people who say, well, of course we shouldn't have IP laws. It's essentially giving a license for a person or a business to monopolize that thing. But then you have others who say, well, actually, yes, we should have these IP laws because it is private property that's being protected, and of course it gives an incentive for more people to actually produce. Whereas if you take it away, then that reduces that incentive because their stuff will be copied instantly and so on. I think it depends very specifically on the context of the IP law. So how far it's going in its protection, what the specific boundaries are, what it's for, so on. And I do tend to flip back and forth between the two different sides of it on, the two different approaches from the free market side. I am concerned with the wording of it. It says we have gone beyond the EU on provisions that tackle online infringement of IP rights. So that sounds to me like it's going to be even heavier IP regulation than they currently have in the EU.
Yeah, that's what I got away from. It looks quite like a bit of a stifling, more than anything else that I can take away from that was it didn't again and of course the EU has very strict piracy. I mean, we'll all remember that probably I think it was about a year ago there was a ban on memes because of copyright laws. So
right.
I mean, if something like that is the sort of how strict the European Union was, what is the prospect for Britain when it comes to that in the future? Because again, obviously one will assume that this is still a work in progress, so we can't really say too much of it, but it does seem that the British government has sort of not really explored. I don't think they've really explored the creative industry, what they define as the creative industries, let's say, further. I mean, I know there's a lot of, again, you go back to sort of like lobbying groups and everything. Those in the creative sector always bang on about piracy and trademarks and everything. So I imagine the government probably just took cues from what's been said in the industry.
Yeah, the intellectual property rights is a very tricky issue because I usually defend intellectual property law based on it's private property. It's the private property of that person for a certain period of time. But on the other hand, he kind of does give the excuse to government interventionists that limitations and regulations create innovation. Because, for example, you could make a similar argument to there was an argument in California, for example, that banning certain types of ways you could hold a firearm. I think the type of stock on a firearm was one of the things created innovation within the firearms manufacturing, because they had to come up with innovative solutions to get around these regulations. Is that sort of, I think the fundamental question we have to ask here is that sort of innovation productive? Yeah, is it just innovation for innovation's sake to get around a law, rather than doing what's the best for the consumer, which is innovation for the sake of actually improving upon the product, rather than innovation of getting around a law? So private intellectual property rights is a very tricky issue in my mind, because it's thin. I agree to it to some extent, because I think that people who come up with the idea should be the first ones to use it. It's the thin edge of the wedge in a certain extent, because it gives that out for for government control and increased regulation. So I'm terribly divided on this issue.
Yeah,
But
I'm well aware that what I'm about to say is very much me sitting on the fence, but I do think it all depends on the context. So, for instance, if there's a copyright regulation that says, once you've created a video game, for instance, say a developer spends 5 years creating a video game, they put it online, charge a price. Obviously, it's bad for another company to come along, just download it, and instantly upload it again and sell it for like half the price. Obviously, there's a problem there. And so in that context, it would be okay, I would say, to have a copyright law in place to protect that. But then when it comes to this context, I think that the wording of it that we brought up, that says, they're trying to build on, what was the specific wording of it? We have gone beyond the EU on provisions that tackle online infringement of IP rights. So that sounds to me like they're increasing it to the point that it'll probably be overkill, and that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I've done a bit of work in the TV industry few years ago, after college, and I mean, I got to learn about we had to learn about intellectual rights, trademarks, and everything, company trademarks, and all that. And again, I understand. I mean, obviously, the biggest concern, obviously, for all these companies is, if, as you said, if somebody like downloads or gets hold of a film and then illegally shares it, and then or whatever, and then they don't get then there's a problem that will emerge there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the question is, how do you do it without without stifling, really, isn't it? It's how do you do it so you don't have overkill, and that's the question of again, how both UK and Japan will go about this, because I mean, I'm not too familiar with Japan. I know that in China there's been problems with like knockoff like SpongeBob SquarePants and knockoff Star Wars and that sort of stuff, like trademarks and everything. So again, I mean, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that happens when you have a society that doesn't hold anything at value and will copy anything willingly, is that you end up with a situation with China where they're trying to quote, copy the master till they become the master, unquote, as ADV China would put it. And it's a complete lack of respect for anyone else's ideas or innovations. I mean, you see the very crap knockoff stuff that the Chinese make out of the poor quality and safety standards and all that sort of stuff. And there's a reason that you should respect intellectual property, but then on the other hand, you go over to somewhere like the European Union, and it's so heavily regulated, or even the United States with Disney trying to extend its patents and copyright on a lot of its material. It just goes to such an extent that now I think Disney is lobbying for a 99 or 90 plus something retention on the right to use its own characters. I mean, it's ridiculous.
And then you get like disgusting cases where it was like I think it was a toddler passed away in America, and the mother put on the gravestone was like a etching of Winnie the Pooh, and of course Disney went after her, and I mean something like that. That's where you have the extreme aspect of it. Now I can't remember exactly. I mean, I remember the story because I mean, it was something that you wouldn't expect Disney to go after. But yeah, I mean that again, that's the extreme example of that. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I think with China, I mean, you could. I mean, I'm again, as I said, I'm not really. My knowledge on the economy, especially with Chinese economy, is limited. But I will say this: China hasn't. China went through that period where they didn't, respect personal property. You talk about the Cultural Revolution. They didn't respect any aspect of personal property or persons in general. Everyone and everything became part of the collective, and obviously, that has developed from that, developed onwards. So, I mean, I'm not surprised. In many ways, I'm not surprised that something like that, the knockoff and the sort of cheap, imitations that are produced in China. Because as we said, they don't respect, intellectual property or anything. And this goes into our next point, which is the business mobility. Business mobility here. So in this section, this stage, so stage 6, is effectively it's about quicker visas, work permits, easier travel between UK and Japan. So I imagine it. I mean, there's sort of reference to if a company has an office in Tokyo and an office in London, that the workforce can be quite easily interchanged between both offices, and that it's easier for businesses to.
They'll make it easier for workers to get visas and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to this, there are a lot of quite obvious political aspects to it that aren't economic when it comes to people moving countries. And I don't think that I'll touch on that, at least, because we want to focus on the economics here. Yeah. When it comes to the economics, I mean, it falls back to a lot of what we've been saying this whole time. And obviously, this is good in that it's better if people can move goods and services, because labor is a service, around without being intervened by some central authority. That's a good thing. But the problem is that it all boils down to what we were saying about having one area where everything is open and everywhere else isn't, how this distorts the market, what it will mean for labor elsewhere. That's the problem, essentially. But if we look at it purely in terms of the UK and Japan, then yeah, I'd say it's good that workers are able to move between the two countries in a more free manner.
And I imagine that the business mobility is sort of hand in hand with the financial services sector, this financial services stage as well, because from what I can gather from the information again that's been put out, it is heavily referencing those that we work in the financial sector. So I mean, it's obviously sort of targeted towards those them as well. Again, UK government claiming that it will break down requirements, the usual visa requirements, and requirements for visas will be clear, transparent, and with an aim that will be processed in 90 days. A worker transferring from their UK HQ to Tokyo offices will be able to bring their spouse and dependents and stay for up to 5 years. So yeah, I mean, as you said, political, a bit more political, more so than economics. I mean, is there anything else you guys would like to add to that when it comes to business mobility?
You cannot separate the political and the economic, unfortunately. And we have to live in a reality where we have to both consider okay, let me put this another way. You have to make a proposal to politicians, especially this is a great lesson for anyone who wants to enter into public office or anything like that. If you are making a proposition to the political establishment or just even the political party out of office, put it in such a way that gets your goal, but also incentivizes the person you're proposing to actually enact the policy. Does that feel dirty? Yep. Welcome to politics. It's a dirty, dirty game. So you need to put it in such a way that incentivizes them to implement the policy while still achieving your own goals. And if you can do that consistently and make friends while doing it, so use the carrot more than the stick, you're going to have a very successful political career. Again, assuming all the other factors of campaigning and, other political jargon.
So, I mean, I would say that's probably a bit of maybe Tony Abbott, influence of Tony Abbott, because obviously he had to think of the political dynamic as well, from the perspective of being a politician, not just an expert and advisor on trade. So possibly what we're seeing, as you said, what you're seeing here is what we've been seeing throughout is the influence of Tony Abbott, where he has, as he said, it's about making it in a way that can sell to the politicians, and obviously how politicians can then sell it to the people. I mean, I haven't really got anything further to really say on that business mobility, because I think
as we say, there's a lot of political stuff to do with people moving countries and migration and such that we could talk about. And yes, we can't separate the politics from the economics, but I feel like it would be too much of a tangent, perhaps. Everyone has their views on migration. I think that's the softest way we can put it.
Yeah, I mean, the current government, I mean, a lot of their policies has been on immigration has been that to try and curbing it. Obviously, it hasn't happened in the way that they hasn't happened in any sort of meaningful way at the moment. But I mean, of course, I mean, you look at Japan. I mean, Japan is quite a homogenous society. It's not diverse in any sense that we would have in the West, for example.
It doesn't need. It's diverse. It's different enough from the West that left wingers. Again, sorry, this is a tangent, but is diverse enough from what standard Western liberals or leftists understand to be Western culture that they will accept the homogenous culture of Japan. I don't think it's that they want actual diversity in every nation. I think rather they would like just a difference from Western culture, and that's the truly sad thing. So they don't. If you think of it like a pie chart, they don't want a bunch of different colors on the pie chart that are evenly distributed. So everyone has, I don't know, 10% of the whole. Rather, they just want to see the European side or the British side or the American side completely removed, and whatever is left there doesn't matter what the size of these different cultures or ethnic groups are, as long as there is no native culture left. Sorry, that's a tangent, but
No,
I don't think that these people mean what they say they mean. I think they mean something else, as we've come to understand throughout all of our interactions with them.
Yeah. I mean, so on the next point, we have the point 7, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and this was, if I remember correctly, this was a partnership that was agreement that was drafted in 2015, and it was signed in 2016. And it includes a list of nations in the Far East, but also in Canada and I believe also Australia as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Mad Mercenary, from your perspective, how would you? I mean, if you can answer this, what do you make of the Trans-Pacific Partnership for Australia?
I would say as a whole, it's political rather than economic in nature.
Do you think there's been any economic benefit to the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Oh, of course, there's economic benefit to the standardization and understanding of rules, but it's not whether the economic growth has or hasn't happened. It's whether economic growth is comparable to whether the trade agreement wasn't there in the first place, and whether we had actual free trade. That's the economic question. But again, I don't think the economic question was the core root of why the Trans-Pacific Partnership was implemented. I think it was ultimately a political decision.
Mm. And of course,
I think judging it upon economic grounds requires the alternative of what an actual free trade system would look like, and we don't have that. So I don't see the reason to compare the Trans-Pacific Partnership based on economic grounds. And as far as I could see, the Trans-Pacific Partnership was not meant to be economic in nature. It was much more geopolitical.
yeah, I mean, it's been the revised version that was signed was called the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So I would, yeah, I mean, there is a quite a deep political spin to this, and I mean, it's quite a. I mean, one thing that's you look at it is it's very much a. It covers not just the Far East and Australia, but it also places like Mexico and Australia, Peru, and I mean, again, Britain seeking access to the Trans-Pacific Partnership uh, as a independent free trading nation is definitely again, I mean, and the main reason for this is, of course, Nissan and Hitachi, which have and this will go on to the I think the UK manufacturer. Oh, hang on a sec, I was looking at the wrong part. Okay, sorry, forget that bit. Yeah, so the British government has put up the Trans-Pacific Partnership as being part of one of the world's largest free trade areas, where 95% of goods are tariff-free. So again, British government going in on the tariff-free. And I imagine, again, this was mix of political and economic reasons for going into this. But how do you think, with the British economy, how do you think this would us going into Trans-Pacific Partnership, how it would either change or influence the current the members, or the actual agreement, the current revised agreement of 2018?
Well, I mean, reduced tariffs is obviously good. The issue with it is all of the other clauses that come in that have the opposite effect and that make the market more difficult to operate in. And also with the question specifically on how it impacts the UK economy, a big question to ask before that is, well, what's the goal of the UK economy? And this is why it's difficult analyzing macro level economics, because everything's viewed in terms of national economies. But then it quickly falls into a debate about what's the best way to raise GDP or whatever. But that's not what economics is concerned with. So,
yeah, so as you said, it is hard to evaluate because we don't. I mean, again, we don't know what the actual goal, long-term goal of the British government for the economy is at the moment. Because a lot of these talks were pre-coronavirus, the initial proposals were pre-coronavirus. So again, as we said, possible to change. Now the next point sort of made me laugh a bit. More malt. I don't know what. So this is the next stage, is trading more malt. More generous quotas for UK, Japan. Malt exports already worth 37 million in 2019. Yes, again.
So there's more information on the government website.
Yeah.
So Japan's guaranteed market access for UK malt exports under an existing quota. And so they're saying that this is more generous, it's easy to access than the EU quota, and that the UK is the second biggest exporter of malt to Japan. So most of these points all boil down to the same talking points at the end of it. Obviously, it is good to have easier access to markets. So it's good that Japan is able to access UK malt without any sort of hindrance. But the problem comes into, well, I mean, it doesn't give any detail on what these quotas are. Do these quotas mean that there are barriers put up to other countries that want to be involved in this trade? That's not specified.
Just by sheer deduction, due to the limited resources that is malt, I'm assuming that is a rather limited resource. By having a quota for Japan, you are necessarily removing the amount that can go to other more efficient areas in the world, making a profit for British companies. So, again, this is good for the Japanese, but on economic side, this is very, very bad. But again, this is a political move rather than an economic one, because if you can do these sorts of, it sets a precedent, right? If you can do these sorts of quotas on malt, imagine what you could do. Let's say if you needed British manufacturing for weapons. Let's say in some sort of heated conflict. Guaranteeing access to supplies and materials. I mean, again, this is not as far-fetched.
And well, yeah, and of course, there isn't much. Again, as you said, there isn't much said. The next point on this, which I'll round into the malt stage, was of course British beef, pork, and cheese and such. And I will just, if we scroll up here, as I said, more generous market access for malt producers. Japan has guaranteed market access for UK malt exports under the existing quota, which is more generous and easier to access than EU quota. The UK is the second highest exporter of malt to Japan, with UK producers exporting 37 million there each year. Again, strong tariff, and they go into, and with the UK pork and beef, slightly different because it's as they put it, a strong tariff reduction for UK pork and beef exports that they have negotiated. It deals that the sees tariffs fall. Again, we don't know how much they fall. We don't know what the actual figure is, which either means yet to publish or it's still open to negotiation later down the road. Again, we will continue to benefit from access to the low tariffs for key foods, drink products covered by quotas. I mean, one of the things I was just going to ask is, how would that play into the current UK food standards for? Because obviously that's something that's been raised throughout by many when it comes to potential trade deals with food from around the world.
Well, I mean, this isn't directly answering that question, but I do find it amusing how they've specified pork, because Liz Truss, who is our trade secretary, who is the one who is negotiating this trade deal, has quite a history, shall we say, with pork markets. She did quite famously. She announced the opening of pork markets in Beijing and was mocked quite a lot in the media, and it turned into a meme. So maybe that was done on purpose as a little kind of wink at the reader.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is a bit of I said wink and sort of self-reflective jokes and that towards that. I mean, and as you said, this trust that was. I remember it was a Conservative Party speech. It was pork and cheese, and especially like Wensleydale, as we said, Wensleydale cheese and cheddar cheese and everything was her favourite go-to points.
As to the state of British agriculture, this is an area where the farmers in most countries, but in the UK, are one of the most powerful lobby groups. They historically always have been, and they continue to be to this day. They have a lot of power because they, of course, control the food supply, and they have a vested interest in maintaining whatever regulation they can to protect their farms. And so this is an area that is not free because of that. With this agreement, this is more focused on tariffs than regulation, I think. Obviously there is the EU regulations that are involved. Does it say anything about that being transferred over to Japan? I don't see it anywhere.
No, it doesn't. I think that that is where there is a stark difference, because of course many of the other stages, there's been sort of the similarities between Britain and the EU when it comes to how they approach. I think with this one, from what I can see, that there is no reference to current EU tariff agreements. So from what I can see, I think this is a completely different position that Britain
Right.
has taken compared to the rest of the EU when it comes to food agriculture that I can see, which is not surprising because I mean, if you look at the original reason why I went into the EU and what the EU was founded upon, and it's sort of one sector that again they've been struggling with since their inception. I'm not surprised that we've sort of broken away and taken a bit of a different direction from them.
Yeah. And so the only information we're really getting here is on tariffs, and of course the way tariffs operate are currently based on the EU single market. So
yeah, that's right. And of course, I mean, a lot of it depends. Of course, I met a reference earlier. It depends what sort of withdrawal agreement or trade deal that we have with the EU, and what they plan to do. Because it looks like, I mean, from where I'm sitting, I don't know if you've been following it, but I don't think we're going to have a trade deal with the European Union, because I think what they've been demanding, effectively preventing England and Scotland and Wales, Northern Ireland, or in this case, England and Northern Ireland, from trading, effectively trading within the nation itself. I think is an untenable position for the UK government to hold and to allow for the EU to politicize. And I mean, I don't know how, if you two have been following the whole question of whether or not the UK government has technically broken international law in a limited and specific way. I don't know if you two.
This is a kind of it's not directly related to that, but there is a very strong argument that international law means absolutely nothing. I mean, obviously, there's the diplomatic repercussions of breaking them.
It's unenforceable, so yeah, that's why it means nothing. Because I mean,
right, and so the issue with breaking diplomatic law is more how it impacts your relations with other countries.
International law, in a sense that enforcement is only at the very much only at the will of the nations who agree to be subject to it, and they could basically just say stuff you at any time. For example, that I believe that's what happened with the United States in a couple instances in Vietnam and a few instances in the war in Afghanistan. They didn't want some of their soldiers prosecuted, therefore they just said, stuff you, you're not prosecuting them. So it's very much based upon power politics. Now, on the other hand, international law can affect your relations with other nations, but that's not a guarantee that relations could go sour. So, for example, there could be an incident in a war between two nations, and like a war crime could be committed by several soldiers, but pressing concerns could force people to overlook that event in order to cooperate on a certain issue, or it could be subject to other political pressures. So international law is not even a good diplomatic law. Incentives for prosecution are always subject to the political. Usually in times of peace and prosperity, people are able to uphold, quote, international law, but during times of hardship and in times of pressure, and when hard decisions need to be made very quickly, it all falls by the wayside.
Yeah. In this specific case, it's not going to matter at all, because everyone involved is going to already have their opinions on the matter, and that's not going to change. And it's just another point for the EU to throw up. It doesn't mean anything.
No, and I mean, from what I can see, there is a strong argument to make that actually the EU broke the withdrawal, or was it the withdrawal agreement first by, and I think it was the UK government lawyers pointed out a subsection on it was an article of the withdrawal agreement, page 184, which any of you guys, in chat or something, can have a look up. It was basically the point of operating negotiations. It was like in a fair and manner, and respecting respecting the concept of sovereignty. I think that was one of the key bits the UK government is going on, because obviously the EU's response to the Boris Johnson's will, wanting to have the internal market between England and Northern Ireland. That seems to be where the accusations of breaking the law, and I think Brandon Lewis, who was the one that coined the term breaking the law in a limited and specific and limited way, sort of, I've said quite bluntly that he that was a mistake on his part, because I don't think he understood exactly what he was saying in the time that he said it, because the government response should have been, well, it's been broken, and from our perspective, it's null and void. And I think
that would require balls.
That would require balls, but I think that could be argued internationally. And P-Man just put it in the chat earlier. Immediately when Brandon Lewis made those comments, Nancy Pelosi came out and said that she would refuse any trade deal to pass through Congress if we did not respect the agreement, which respects which respects the Good Friday Agreement, which is all wrapped up in this as well. So again, I think the whole debate whether or not international law was broken, I think it was at best you can say that, well, both sides, it's broken down from both sides, but where I'm sitting, I think there's a strong case for the UK government to say, in reality, it was the EU sort of started it when they refused to acknowledge the sovereignty aspect, which they promised to agree in the original text. But yeah, that's just me going into the sort of the constitutional aspects of it.
Well, ultimately, I think that not that the Constitution doesn't matter, but ultimately, I think a lot of these are based upon the idea that you're in a circumstance where you have the luxury of respecting, international law and order, and all these sorts of agreements. Whereas, if the circumstances are pressing enough, you don't have that luxury. So I think Fez has a very good point here in saying that international law is not law; it's more like a bylaw, or it's more like norms or guidelines.
Yeah, norms are the right word. It's an attempt to instill normative ideas onto the international stage about how to do things.
Yeah, the rules we have it. You hear it in the media. The rules-based order is the sort of term that's banded around, that's been banded around this particular subject. One would hope that, when it comes to the trade dealing itself in the future, one would hope that context would come into it for other nations. So, like, the next trade deal that we're working towards is South Korea and such. And one you would, if say between now and then we do break the, or we do go back on the deal that was made. The context where it come in was South Korea will say, well, you could just the perspective would be, well, Britain and the EU were at loggerheads because Britain was part of the EU, and it's not the same as exactly that. What it won't be that the same circumstances of breaking an agreement will happen, say, with Britain and Japan, or Britain and South Korea, because that's what a lot of the comparisons that the opposition in Britain is going along, that we're going to break this agreement with Japan in the future. And I mean, my question to all those people that are saying that is, well, what's the incentive that for us to break it? I mean, I don't, because unless Japan's going to be ordering us, telling us that we can't trade specific goods with Northern Ireland, I don't see what the problem is going to be.
Yeah, and I think at this point, especially from the Japanese perspective, that cooperation is far better strategy than antagonization, especially in the environment that I think the world is entering into. But I think what we're kind of overlooking here in this discussion is that the United States' trade deals and their renegotiations of their position within the world has really laid a foundation for the British now making their own trade deals, and it's quite interesting to watch and see how these trade deals are working out in a very similar sort of fashion to how the Americans were negotiating. Not in the sense of they were playing hardball tactics, but in the outcome. It's just rather than the hard line America first sort of stuff. It's more of a cooperative tone, but it's still essentially a very similar outcome of higher cooperation, tariffs on certain goods, more free trade, a rearrangement of how much is traded. It's similar in a sort of sense. And I think this cooperation kind of came from the idea that the United States wants a lot more people on side. So maybe there was some pressure in the background from that sort of subconscious thought, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just a
it does.
rambling thought I had.
Yep.
I have a lot of those.
And of course, Fez says that Liam Fox is running to chair the World Trade Organization. I mean, I heard about that. I don't know what the likelihood of him actually getting the position as the chair. I mean, it'd definitely be. I mean, if he did get it, it'd definitely be good for Britain. It'd be very good news for Britain.
Yeah, probably beneficial for the UK, but not necessarily good in terms of economics. I mean, the very existence of the WTO is a problem.
Yeah.
Well, hands over authority by the very fact that it exists, it hands over authority to a international body. So I'm not in favor in that sort of sense.
No, well, maybe if he gets in, he'll just like first thing is, well, I'm putting forward the idea to abolish it or something like that.
It's like the when you get libertarians running for office. It's like, we want to become the state so that we can remove the state.
Yeah, the ultimate 4th chess move by the government.
I mean, anyone who states that they want to enter into an organization to dissolve it, either doesn't dissolve it because they're enticed by the political incentives, or they are not elected in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, dream on. Yeah. Yeah, no, I just that was a bit of a dream idea.
So how many more points do we have to go through? Because
yeah, I mean, I think
that was the last one.
That was the last one.
Okay.
The big tariff production. I mean, guess to just quickly summarize all of this. Where do you guys think that this initial partnership agreement, this trade partnership agreement, in principle, how do you think how this stands up? Bearing in mind this is Britain's first trade independent trade agreement in 50 years.
Well, it could be worse. As Madmerk has pointed out, there's clearly this heavy focus on cooperation, on mutual benefit here, as opposed to it being fairly hostile. clearly they've been able to agree with a lot of things in, as we mentioned earlier, quite a difficult scenario, and doing it over a video call. As to the content of the trade deal itself, I mean, free trade, good. Reduction of tariffs, good. But all of the regulations that are being involved, bad.
Yeah. They're carrying a lot of bad habits of EU regulation with them. And that, for me, I think that's where they're going to maybe struggle with other nations in the future when it comes to trade deals. I mean, for me, I think when I looked at it, there was, as you said, there were some bits when it comes to zero tariffs. Yeah, that's okay, that's good. But when it comes to, I mean, for me, I think it was the privacy and data one, as you said, that was the sort of carrying over of an EU policy. I just don't see why they need to do it.
I mean, considering coming out of the EU, where you haven't had to negotiate trade deals for a while, and the fact that you're coming out of an institution where the civil service was, as I pointed out, was necessarily more pro-European and pro-European style of doing things, which is a very bureaucratic way of doing things. I think this is a good step forward. Obviously, it's not ideal, but it's a good first step. We'll see where it goes. Ultimately, I think this agreement between the United Kingdom and Japan rests more with Japan than with the United Kingdom and where it goes. But that's my own political thought and how I think the world's shaping out.
Yeah, I think that's quite good summary, I guess, from both you guys. One final thing, Mad Mercenary, would you like to shill your competition that I hear that you've got going on?
Oh, yes, sure. Thank you. On the Econ Hour Discord server, I believe there's a link in the description of this video or in the chat somewhere. We are running a currency design competition with which will be judged by myself and Radical Liberation. Basically, what we're trying to do is encourage community activity. Getting together, design your own currency. It can be either notes or coins. We don't care. Anything is acceptable. We will be judging all of these entries in a stream at the end of the year, where we'll have just a lighthearted stream. We'll get together, have a few drinks, that sort of thing. Just a little special way we can say thank you. And for the winner of this currency competition, they will have some actual silver mailed to them. So some actual silver, yes, real silver. We're not making anything up. Real silver will be mailed to them. So as a little reward.
Very unique.
That's nice.
Everyone in the chat, I want to see you all submitting to this competition.
You haven't submitted yet. Where's your submission? No, but the more entries, the better. We would like to see everyone get involved. It's a great little community activity. If you're really on the right and you're really concerned about wholesomeness and actually getting involved and stuff and having a good laugh and building friendships, this is a good way, because we're gonna have a nice stream at the end of the year. We got a few things planned out for that. Great way to get involved. So go ahead, enter into the Discord. It's a very lovely Discord. We have lots of great people who are very knowledgeable and friendly, and will help you out with anything that they can. And we just want to see you there and get involved. So thank you very much for letting me shill that.
Is your Discord in the video description?
I've just I'll put that. I've got the Discord up. I'm gonna have to put it in once we go off. I'll put it in the description below.
Alrighty.
And I'll put Jack. I'll put your Discord as well in as well. Okay. Jack, is there anything else you would like to shill while we're here?
Nothing specifically. I guess I've got a stream tomorrow. It's not an economic-based stream. I am playing Crusader Kings 2. So anyone who likes that game, we've got an online game going with over 20 people now who are contributing to this game. They're all people from the community, so you should recognize them. It's every Sunday, 9 p.m. UK time. So yeah, come over to my channel if you want to watch that.
Yeah, and you can also see Harrion get cut as well.
Yes.
So there's another reason to watch it as well. Yeah, and as I said, I've got streams coming up on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. With again, usual strategy stuff. So apart from that, I think that's probably about it, guys. I can't really think of anything else. Thank you both for coming on and sort of going through this government pamphlet at best, and sort of putting your knowledge and your input into what sort of decoding what's been said.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be invited on. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. This was a very nice stream. Love the company.
Thank you. And I mean, hopefully we can, you guys maybe when there's more announcements in the future, you can sort of you guys could probably look into further detail of what future government trade policies and such. But I mean, I will bid you all good night, and obviously, Mercenary, have a good day.
Yes, it's I need breakfast.
Yeah, go have your breakfast. And everyone else, have a good evening. And I will see you all later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Farewell.